Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of your favorite podcast, the Tech Your Business podcast. Today on the podcast, we would have a guest. We've had a lot of that of recent, and they've always been a lot of brought enough knowledge, a lot of fun, and everything. So we'll have a guest today that's going to talk about AI with us. And today, what we'll be talking about is how AI. I'm sure you've been a lot of us are Marvel fans. We watch the comics and all that. You've seen Iron Man, and you know how Iron Man. It's normal, and he puts on his suit and he's a superhero. So we'll talk about how AI is becoming that for businesses these days. So today, to discuss that with us, we'll be talking to Ben Schreiner. He's the head of innovation SMB at Amazon Web Services AWS, and he'll share his thoughts on AI, on cloud, and small business. So welcome to the show, Ben.
Peter, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, can you start by explaining your role at AWS and your focus on SMBs and entrepreneurial companies? And also let us know what attracted you to this space.
Sure, Peter. I think I'm a little biased, I'll admit, the best job at AWS. I had a great team of very senior technology strategists that help small and medium businesses tackle their biggest challenges. And I think most of your audience and every small business owner that I've ever met is trying to grow their business. They're trying to grow it profitably, and they're trying to make a living, and potentially have something to hand down to the next generation or to sell at some future point in their lives. And so it's an exciting area. AWS has been invested for several decades in helping small and medium businesses leverage technology. And my reason for being involved in this particular segment, I've worked at very large global banks. I worked at another large tech provider, and AWS in the cloud just really levels the playing field for small and medium businesses. There was a time, Peter, where you had to be a big organization to afford the technology and the staff to be able to run, let's call it, the old data warehouse back in the day, right? Or some of these big ERP systems that would create a competitive advantage. And I'm excited because the customers we're talking to, they want help. They want to be successful. They want to understand, and that's why your podcast is so important. They want to understand how to leverage technology to make them better, right? To engage their customers better, to create new products, whatever it is. But technology is playing a role in almost every industry. And for me, that's very exciting. And then AWS has, I like to say, all the toys you could ever want to play with if you're into technology. So it's like kid in a candy store. I am my brain is very happy because there's so many cool technologies that really could help a small medium business, change their trajectory.
That's wonderful. So, for the topic today, for small business leaders still new to AI, let's start at the beginning. How do you, for the ones who haven't heard about it, how do you define generative AI in simple terms for them? And what makes it a game changer, like you said, for them also?
All right. So, in the simplest terms, I like to say this because almost everybody's heard of it or played with it by now. And I like to start with this: it's not magic, it's math. Okay. It's just math. It's a lot of math and a lot of really complicated math that none of us want to do. But the cloud and the amount of compute that is available now has made the math possible, and it's made it more affordable so that these tools are now becoming more accessible to people like you and me, and folks that are running small and medium businesses. So net, what it is a model, a lot of data, and especially in the generative AI space, it's trying to predict what the next answer should be based on all the information it has. And it has more information available to it, Peter, than you and I can comprehend, right? There's just so much information, but it's guessing. It's doing an algorithm to guess the next possible, whether it be Note if you're trying to create music, or Word if you're trying to create a Word document. But based on the data and the inputs, it's trying to guess and give you the best possible answer. And so, simply put, it's a very profound and transformational technology. I'd say your audience members will appreciate this. If they know nothing about AI, they all remember when the internet became a thing, right? It became a thing that we talked about, all the promise. We all lived through the dot-com bubble and the bust, and we all learned some really valuable lessons in technology. This is equivalent to changing all industries the way the internet changed how we do business. It changed every business, and I don't know how we would do a lot of things without the internet nowadays. And I think your audience will appreciate that, and they need to be thinking about AI in a similar vein. They don't need to jump in head first, but they need to start learning, which is why your podcast is so important, to start learning about these technologies and then determine how best to take advantage of them.
Definitely. So I remember back in the day, at least I was fortunate to live before the internet, where if we had to write a letter to someone in another country, you write the letter and you have to wait for maybe 3 months, 4 months, even 6 months before you get a reply. We're so patient those days.
Yeah, right. And now, Peter, I bet if you're watching a show on your phone and it buffers for even a half a second, you get upset. Right? Like, look how far we've come, Peter. Like you and I have no tolerance for buffering. And if we think for just a second about what's happening when Netflix is delivering that show to your phone, like while you're on the go, it's just fascinating how far we've come from the days of waiting 3 months or 6 months for a reply.
Honestly. All right. So for a small business new to AI, what would a basic starting point look like for them? What are the key first steps you would advise them to take? As you say, they shouldn't jump head first.
Yeah, so we put together a short training. I think it's 15 minutes long for executives. That's free. I encourage people just to start learning, right? Learn what the terms are, learn what a foundational model is, learn the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning. Some of these things can be a little confusing, but I think spending just a little bit of time reading, watching a few videos, listening to some podcasts can help learn the vocabulary. But for a small and medium business owner, they really, this is the best advice I can provide, is they have to determine what problem they want to solve. Okay, so I don't like when people look for technology and they have technology and they're looking for a problem. It's the wrong way, right? And so right now there's a lot of excitement and people are like, oh, what can I do with it, what can I do with it? And the first question is like, what problem do you have? And so I like to say, just to frame things, is what do you spend the most money on? What do you spend the most time on? And what do your customers complain about the most? Okay, those three things are worth solving, right? Because if you can reduce your cost a little bit of your biggest cost, you can reduce it a little bit, or get a little more efficient. That can have a meaningful difference in your small and medium business. If you spend a lot of time in a particular area and you can get more efficient, that can free up time to talk to more customers or get new customers. That can really help you grow your business. And then lastly, right, what do your customers complain about? We all want happy customers, but I think we all know that your best customer is the one who complains and tells you the shortcomings of your product and service, because that's how you learn and get better. Most of us don't like that feedback. I'll be honest; it's hard to hear, but it probably is the best feedback you can get to making your business and your product and your service better. And so, if you start with one or of those things, then you have to look at the data, right? So these models, AI, ML, all of these things, they're only as good as the data that they have access to. And so the first thing is what problem, then what data do you need to solve the problem? Then you can look at the technologies and the tools that would be best suited to help you solve it. So if I'm honest, the AI or generative AI is almost the last thing that I want to talk about, because it's all the things leading up to it that make sure we're choosing the right tool. And you've been in technology for a long time, right? And you know this as well as anybody else. There's always 6 ways to solve the problem, like at least 6 ways, right? And so
True.
as a small and medium business owner, you want to solve it once. You want to solve it as best and most affordable. And so you've got to do that homework and really narrow your focus so that you can solve the problem the most efficient way possible.
Amazing. So, first of all, you look for what problem you want to solve, look at the data available to solve that problem before you look at tools, and the tools are AI and everything else. I think
I
that'll
know
be.
that's not how most people want to talk about the tools, right? And I know it, right? It's so natural. If you're in technology, you drive to the
Go
solution,
straight.
and it's right, and it's it's what makes technology so fun. But I really, as a business owner, you have to be prudent, right? I can tell you, I've bought a lot of tools over the years, um, and I've made mistakes. I think we all have, and learn from them. But you really want to solve problems. That's why you leverage technology, is to solve problems. And I think the better we understand those, then the better the technology is, and the better the solutions are. So ultimately, it betters the business in the end.
True. All right. So we've talked about learning, the learning parts, learning about the terminology, learning about the terms and everything. The second part most business owners might be bothered about when they look at AI. AI looks intimidating. I know a lot of them have the normal chat interface and cool, but when you want to
Sure.
integrate these things with other parts of your business, you might now have to start coding and going deeper than that
In the
normal
weeds. You're
typing.
going in the weeds.
All right. So for small businesses, where do skills gaps normally arise when they try to adopt AI? And how can businesses upskill their teams to make it easier for them to adopt AI in their businesses?
Yeah, Peter, the simple truth is, right, most small and medium businesses don't have that that technical expert. They're not going to have a data scientist with a PhD, ready to help them with their project, perhaps. And so they need to look at alternatives. And so one way is a partner, a technology partner who has these experts that all they do is AI and ML and these types of things. There are other solutions. I think a lot of small businesses are actually going to be consumers of AI versus creators of AI. If I'm honest, so AI is going to be embedded in the tools that they use, and so they'll be consumers versus creators. But there's a lot of training. We've got a lot of training that we've put together. But I'll share this. We look at AIML in 3 layers. If you think of your favorite cake, layer cake, right,
Hmm.
with the cake and then the icing and then the cake and then the icing. There's 3 different layers for us, and the first layer is the hardware, right? It's the most basic foundational building block, and there you've got chips and compute and the speed of the network. All of those things are important. And Amazon, I think you've heard of the shortage of chips, and they're hard to come by.
Yeah.
These It's very process intensive. What we're talking about, AIML, and so we've spent a lot of time and energy investing in our own chips that are actually performing very well and saving time and
Hmm.
making saving time and money, making it easier and more cost efficient to train and do the inference that needs to be done with these models. So that's kind of that first layer, and that to me, Peter, is that's in the weeds, right? Like you're way down in the weeds, down at the chip layer. The next layer up is kind of the application. So think about the models and how you interact with the models, building an AI application. And for that, we've launched Bedrock. It's now generally available. It is a managed service, so you don't have to worry about managing the compute. You go in, you pick which models, you can start to interact with it. Again, for some small and medium businesses, that'll still be intimidating, to be fair. But for some, they're at that level of sophistication where I want to run it and I want it to do what I want it to do. And then the next layer up of abstraction is really interacting with AI. And so we've got different services that you can call that you could send the transcript of this podcast and then have it create an audio with different voices, right? Or you could send the audio of this and it would give you the transcript. And then you could take that transcript and you could put it into a different language and convert it to maybe Spanish or whatever you wanted, right? So those are all AIML services, but you or the person interacting with it doesn't need to understand the model or anything else. They just need to know I give you an audio file, I get back a text file in the language that I chose, right? Much easier, Peter, to do that than to deal with the chips and the frameworks at the in the weeds level. So
Yeah.
we are trying very hard to give you different levels, and depending on what you're trying to do, to be able to come into this transformational technology and really be productive. And that's how we are approaching helping customers get started.
Nice. All right. So for most organizations, for instance, back in the day when the computer came up, when the computer replaced the typewriter, a lot of things had to change around the way people worked. When the internet came up, a lot of things had to change again about how everyone worked. So now, while adopting AI, what cultural or organizational changes might be required by these businesses to flawlessly adopt it?
Great question, Peter. I think this is really a good question for leaders. There are people out there that are afraid of AI, right, and what it might become, right? We've seen the movies. We like the Iron Man version versus some of the other movies, right? Um, and so I think we need to be responsible. I think we need to go in eyes wide open, and there's ethics involved on how you use these tools. Um, but I really think from a cultural point of view, it's going to be learn and figure out how this can help you. It's going to augment your job. And I think in a few years' time, people who use these tools are going to start to get ahead faster than people that don't use these tools. No different than the people who used to handwrite the letter and then the ones who started using a typewriter. The typewriter was faster, and you got rid. We all forgot how to write cursive, right? Because we started to type. Um, so I think that evolution is going to come. So again, I appeal to everybody to say just start learning so that you don't fall behind. And I do think this is going to augment like your ability to have a whole bunch of data and then have the computer summarize it for you. Like it could save you all kinds of time, right? And I'm sure, again, in your line of work, again, taking a podcast and turning it into a blog, it's great if you could just take the audio and then create the text and then just um, you know edit the text versus I'm listening, I'm pausing, I'm typing, I'm rewinding, I'm typing, right? I think this is going to make things easier, right? That's the hope, right? But like any tool, you can use a hammer to build a house, you can use a hammer to break your thumb, right? Like it's all in how you use the tool is really important to what the result is going to be. And so again, back to what problems are you trying to solve? I think small and medium businesses are going to find opportunities for automation. Okay, connecting things, right? If you have one screen here, yeah, you're looking at, and then you're typing information into another screen, like get rid of that step, right? If the data is here and I need it in another application, I just want to move it or have it move by itself where I need it to go. Because if I have a human being reading and typing, they might make a mistake. They put the address in wrong, and then you don't get your package because the address was wrong. Well,
Yeah.
why do I need to type the address in, Peter? I can look it up your address, right? So I should be able to eliminate errors in my process so that the data flows smooth and the products and the services flow smooth. I think there's lots of operational efficiencies that businesses are going to find. What I don't think you're going to have is AI interacting without any oversight or governance or people watching, right? I think you know this, and we'll talk about hallucinations, right? And then the machines, you ask the question, and it's going to give you an answer, and when it gives you an answer, you're going to read it thinking that answer is right, right? Like the confidence that it comes across in the answer, you just think it's right. And I'll tell you a short story because it was funny and it resonates. Um, I run a consumer advisory focus group inside of AWS where we bring a bunch of customers together and we talk. And one of the topics was, of course, AI. And one of our dear customers said, I've got a great story for you. I've got an 8-year-old daughter who had a book report for school. And I hadn't read the book. So I asked one of the models for a summary of the book. And I got the summary. It was great. And I read the summary. And then I went to talk to my daughter about this book. And my daughter looked at me and said, Mommy, I don't know what you're talking about. This book wasn't about that at all. And so the lady goes back to the model and said, "Hey, this wasn't accurate." And the model goes, "Oh, yeah, I know." Like it just there was no I'm guessing in the answer, right? It was and so I think all of us have to have a way to double check the answer. You've got to make sure the model and the machine is doing what you want it to do. And we can trust, but we need to verify. And you need to build that into whatever you build. We, as human beings, need to be checking that it's doing what we want it to do. And when it stops doing what we want it to do, we need a way to, unplug it so that it stops doing whatever it is. And I think that responsibility is really important, and we all share in that responsibility.
Really true. And what you said is very, very true because for these podcasts, there's one thing I say that if this podcast was around this time, maybe 2 years ago, it would have been almost impossible to get. Well, not so much possible. We'll probably have needed a team like 5 or 10 times what we have now to get everything out. Because, like you said, well, we actually do what you said. Once the interview is over, just take the audio, put it, transcribe it, get the main
Yep.
points out, make the blog post, make the social media post. It
See?
just
And
makes
I was guessing.
everything.
I didn't even know you did all that, Peter. I was a guess. That's awesome that you're doing that already.
Honestly, it makes everything so easy. But like you said, also, a lot of times it's possible for AI to say things that didn't happen or things that are not there. So there's that need to really cross check everything that comes out from it.
Right, because once you post that blog post, that's from Peter, right?
Exactly.
and your audience is expecting you to have reviewed and made sure that it's accurate, right? So I'm glad that you're checking because it's important. It's an important step.
Definitely. And when you look at it, the way AI has like I said, would have needed maybe a team like 10 times what we have now to make this possible. And that is the same for a lot of other businesses that have applied AI. So when we talk about the cloud, how does the cloud make things like this possible? Make small businesses access advanced technologies like AI easily.
Yeah, so the cloud really has leveled the playing field. We like to say we're democratizing technology and making it so the little guys and companies of all sizes have access to the same capabilities. The big difference between traditional technology, what I grew up with, and the cloud is you used to have to buy or rent servers. And if you wanted to run a piece of software, you bought a server and you put the software on it, you would run it. But you had that sunk cost. Whether you used the software or not, you couldn't turn it off. You had to spend that money. And that's again the traditional way of technology. Fast forward to now, and you have software as a service, which is usually running in a cloud, and it's more often than not running on AWS, even if you don't know it, or AWS as a cloud provider. And what's different here is at AWS, you only pay for what you use. So if you had a piece of software that you were running and you don't work on the weekends, you can hit pause and it won't be available for Saturday or Sunday, but you don't need it Saturday and Sunday. Well, guess what? You just saved 2 days of expense and you cut your costs. And if you have a business like many small businesses that have peaks and valleys, they have seasonality to the business. Well, you used to, in the technology world, you had to buy enough hardware to support the peak, because what you didn't want was to run out of capacity or have everything go dog slow or have it crash or anything bad happen. Because when the peak is when you make your money, right? So you want all the technology to work. And so often what technologists would do so that we don't get yelled at for having the site crash on peak day, right, is we would buy way too much, right? There's no way we're going to use all this as insurance so that we keep our jobs, right? Like it's all self-preservation, and it was all for keeping the business moving forward. But then when the peak comes down, you have all this capacity that's just sitting there underutilized. And in the cloud, you don't have that. You have the ability to go up when you need it, but then you have the ability to come back down when you're no longer using those services. And that really makes it infinitely more affordable because you're only paying for what you're using. So that's concept number one. Concept number two is just around innovating. We have we have over 200 different services that you can go in and within a couple of clicks and in a few minutes be using them. And
Wow.
in the traditional sense, you would have to, ask for a quote from the vendor, you wait for the server to show up, you have to put it in the rack and get your screwdriver out, connect everything. Like it would take weeks, right, to get to a point where you could start to your experiment. And with us, you could be experimenting in minutes, right? So you compress the amount of time it takes, and that means you can innovate more. And then again, I've admitted I've made mistakes. If that innovation doesn't work out like you hoped, at AWS, you just turn it off. You're not spending money anymore. But in the traditional world, if you already bought that server, you were out that money, and hopefully you've got another thing you can use it for, and you just recycle it in some way. But you're still out that money. There's no way to get it back, right?
Yeah.
And so those are some of the foundational differences: is just speed and agility, and just access. The other thing is just the reliability. We spend a lot of time and a lot of money on security, way more than any of your audience members could ever spend themselves. And when you come to AWS Cloud, you inherit all of our security best practices, all the things that we do to protect the cloud, you get because you're using our service. And now our customers, we call it a shared responsibility model, because while we protect the cloud, you have to protect what you put in the cloud. So if you put an application, you put some data, it's your responsibility to make sure that that's secure. So we share that responsibility, but we do take a lot of the heavy lifting off so that you can focus on the bits that you want to focus on. And so, honestly, it's a changing paradigm. It's a more effective, efficient way to do technology. And you're seeing a lot of adoption, right? Whether it's software as a service or migrating things out of a co-location or from under your desk, wherever you're hiding your technology, and putting it someplace where you can trust it and get access to it, is really helping people do more, actually with less, in less time, or with less money.
True, and it actually helps with a lot of waste too, because in those cases where you buy a lot of equipment and then you keep it and it's not doing anything, that's a lot of resources.
Exactly right. Yeah, I mean, we all have to be thinking about the environment, right? And Amazon and AWS takes sustainability very seriously. And we're driving towards being, our carbon footprint being neutral. We've founded the Climate Pledge, and are really pushing ourselves in all the ways that we can to be more sustainable in how we deliver. We're one of the biggest consumers of clean energy. We have some of the most green projects, whether they be solar or wind energy. And so we're doing a lot in that respect as well. And by coming to us, again, customers benefit from our sustainability practices, and it helps them achieve sustainability goals that they may have.
All right. So in the previous question, you mentioned services, and we all know that. Okay, a couple of us know that AWS comes in a couple in different modules and everything. So for small businesses, what services does AWS offer to make it easier for them to leverage AI?
Sure. So right out of the gates, the simplest service or building blocks are compute, storage, and database. Like every small business has to have some storage. They all are running databases, whether they want to or not. And compute just powers, all the things. Um, when it comes to AI ML, there's a bunch of things that we're doing to try and make it easier. I mentioned the three layers and trying to build things that they could just interact with. Bedrock is a managed service that allows them to just choose the model and then begin taking advantage of the model or training the model as they see fit. And then the other thing we do is we have a very large ecosystem of partners around the world that are well versed in our various services and technologies. And we try and help match up customer need with partners that have that expertise, whether it's in a technology or in a particular industry, to help those small and medium businesses move forward or move faster. And then I mentioned the training. We will continue to invest in making training available to all folks, whether they're changing careers or looking to add to their career or just learning something new. We believe that continuous learning. That's why I got into technology. It changes so much. You have to learn. You have to love learning because technology just changes so fast. And so for me, it's been a great career choice because it forces me to continue to learn, and I
Learn.
encourage everybody to do so.
Yeah. So there's one thing with new technologies and businesses. A lot of times, the way these new technologies come up, the business owners feel these things are hypes. Like couple of a couple of is it months or years ago, we had Web3 everywhere, we had NFTs everywhere, and now nobody talks about that. So when so when they see things like that, it's rather difficult for them to jump on the bandwagon because they don't really know where this is going to lead. So what advice do you have for business leaders trying to cut through this hype to what should they realistically expect from AI?
Yeah, great question, Peter. I'll go back to what I previously said, and that's just learn. Right, learning, being observant, do your reading, do your research. But for me, it comes back to that problem, right? Like this shouldn't be you're looking for a technology. It should be I'm looking for a solution to this problem. AI may be part of the solution, but it may just be data analytics and not
Mm,
AI, right? Like it,
yes.
it really that if I'm and I'm a technologist, and for me to say this is blasphemy, but it's not about the technology. It's about the problem, right? So if we focus on the problem, the technologist will choose the best technology, but it starts with the problem itself. And again, I think uh, as we learn more about the problem, you'll zero in on the right technology or the right model or the right approach to solving that problem. But it all starts with the problem itself.
Nice. All right. So, what are some quick win ways or some quick wins SMBs can have when they start testing AI? So, what are some things they can do to get quick wins so they can prove its value before they start making major investments into it?
Yeah, so we're seeing a bunch of examples. The first is customer support. You and I both have called customer support, and I'm sure you've done all the troubleshooting you know how to do, as have I. And you're talking to someone who is asking you to do the same things you've already done, right? And what you want is second level support, and you have already done those things. Well, I think AI in the area of customer support is going to be able to look at all the tickets, all the manuals, all of the answers, and make those customer service representatives infinitely more responsive to the customer, because you could have AI listening to the conversation, hearing the question, hearing the steps that are already taken so they don't have to repeat the steps again, right? We know you rebooted the router already. Okay, well, I don't need to tell you to reboot the router. You told me you already did that. So we skipped that step, right? So the machine augmentation of customer support, I think, is a very fascinating area. We've got a product called Connect, which is a virtual call center and technology to allow for call centers to operate more effective and efficiently. And some of the AI that we've built into that solution allows for us to determine if a caller is the sentiment, right? Are they happy? Are they agitated?
Mm.
Should we suggest the next level before the customer says, "I want to talk to your manager," right? Like if you can say, "Hey, I think it'd be great. I'm going to introduce you to my manager." That's way more calming than the customer getting upset, demanding to talk to the manager, right? So we're trying to leverage and bring AI tools and metrics and things to help customer contact centers operate more effectively and efficiently and better serve customers. The other one is marketing, right? We just started, and it was announced maybe a couple of weeks ago, that on Amazon.com, which hopefully you've been to, um, Amazon.com has products and lots of them. And if you're a seller and you need to describe your product, we now have embedded generative AI to help you write that product
Mm.
description, right?
Wow.
Just to make it a little easier for you to do that, right? And so these are some things that folks can use that can help them. The last one I'll leave you with is for the developers that are out there. We did release something called Code Whisperer, and Code Whisperer is a developer augmentation, and it's going to, as you start to code and tell it what problem you're trying to solve, it will start to suggest snippets or whole sections of code that could help you write code faster. And I know a lot of developers, and they will tell you that there's a lot of repetition in what they do, right? And they pull bits from different places. It's a lot of cut and paste. And so these tools are helping developers be more proficient so that they can focus their time on the bits that are new and different and not on the repetitive tasks. So those are a few things that are quick wins that we're seeing customers respond, very quickly to. We have tools that do transcribe and things like that for folks that need those kinds of services as well.
Hmm, amazing. All right, so we've been talking about the positives and how good AI is for businesses and co. So let's look at the other side. Are there any negatives to businesses adopting AI? Is there any maybe business or any category you can say should not adopt AI?
So, Peter, we talked briefly about hallucinations,
Yeah.
and that's a downside, right? That is a negative. Is you're not going to know. The computer's not going to say, "I don't know." It's going to give you an answer, and so we need to build in checks and balances to validate that the answers are correct. And so that to me is the downside: is how do we build those? How do we check? How do we double check? Because we could get very comfortable that it's always working, and then it doesn't, and we're not checking, and then bad things could happen. There are a number, and people can Google. There have been a number of chatbots released over the years that quickly became and started to do and say things that were not intended. And I'm not going to name any names. You can Google them; they're very well known. Um, and so, how do you make sure that that doesn't happen? How do you make sure that it is doing what you need it to do? And so, I think having governance, being responsible, needs to be a priority in order to make sure that we avoid, kind of the negative things that can happen. Um, that would be my advice.
All right. All right. So looking at the future of AI, AI capabilities that I imagine are you most excited about for small businesses in the next few years?
I am most excited about the transformation that small and medium businesses are going to have around customer experience, around just customer satisfaction. I think you're going to have you're going to be able to enable your sellers or your service people to be more articulate, more informed, have the information right at their fingertips. They're going to be able to, if you hire new people, those people are going to be able to ramp up faster than in years past. So you're going to get more efficiency there. So I think we're going to see in the next few years AIML is going to change every single industry in some way, shape, or form. I think small and medium businesses are often the disruptors of big industries, right? They started their small and medium business to solve a problem in the community or in the space that they're in because it wasn't being met by these bigger organizations. And so I think this is a great opportunity for small and medium businesses to look at their industry, pair it with this new technology, and see if they can become a disruptor in their industry or even in a new industry. It doesn't matter. I think it's the creativity and the innovation in this space that is actually going to push the boundaries and really, probably take down some of the big organizations that are out there that are just stuck in the old ways of doing things. They're stuck in paper file cabinets and old ways of doing technology that newer companies or smaller companies who are more agile can take advantage of this technology and of the opportunity that's in front of them. So I'd encourage all your listeners to be looking at their expertise, checking out this technology, and see if you can't put your expertise and this technology together to create something very special.
True. So, talking about advice still, is there anything probably I've not talked about that you would like to share with our listeners, business owners, on preparing for the future? Because, like you said, and like we all see, AI is something that's going to change everything. It's not like most of those things we heard of and died out. It's something that's really useful. Like it comes out and you just see different ways you can apply it, and everyone is just so excited about it. So, do you have any advice for business owners on preparing?
Yeah, so Peter, there's definitely a lot of hype and there's definitely a lot of excitement. And I, for one, I think it's warranted. I think this technology is going to transform a lot of industries. So I do think the hype is warranted. But I will say this, we're early. We're early in this development. And so I encourage again people to start learning now. But I'll say this: there's a few things that are really important about our approach, and I want to make sure the listeners understand this. Is that security is very important. Your data and the privacy of your data is very important. There are some very well documented cases where people put things into models that then ended out in the internet, right? And you may not want your data out on the internet if it's proprietary or intellectual property. Like your data about your business and your customers, you need to protect that, right? And certainly in EMEA with the GDPR and all the data protection governance, it's important to know where your data is. It's also important to know that the data in the model and where the model is, right? And so we believe you should bring the model to your data and not that you should put your data up in somebody else's model where you lose control over it. So that's an important point is protect your data, but the outputs are only going to be as good as the data it has access to, right? So I do think you're going to need to augment a generic foundational model with your own data because those models aren't going to know about your customers. They're not going to know how you solve problems. They're not going to know all your products, right? There's limitations to the data that train those models. And so you bringing the model to your data makes the model much more capable. So protect your data, number one. Security, really important. And then it's again solving problems. There are a bunch of people who are experimenting right now. I call it playing with the technology, and it's fun. Um, but all small and medium business owners need to think about time and return on time. And none of us have enough time. None of us have enough money. And so you need to make sure that you're solving real problems that are worth solving, and not just doing experiments and playing around, right? Because sooner or later, you have to stop playing and you have to actually get to work. And so the sooner you can apply these technologies to real business problems, that's when you're going to get value and you're going to get a return on that time. But if you're just playing, I don't know. I mean, it's a good way to educate yourself. So there's a time and a place for it, but you also have to make sure that you eventually are getting value out of it for your business. And so, those are the things that I would see as really important to consider. The other one I would say is this: there are some out there that are focused on a single model, right? And we at Amazon do not believe that one model will rule them all. We believe that you should bring your problem to a model and try it with this one, try it with that one, try it with this one, because you don't know what the answers are going to be. You don't know which model is going to perform better. So we believe people are going to want to try different models to see what the different answers are. The other thing is the sizes of the models are very different. They have great big ones, you have pared down versions, and the smaller the model, the more cost effective it is to run. And so we think you're going to want to see put the right size model against the right problem, right? So that you're not spending money unnecessarily on a great big model when really all you needed was something much smaller. So I think once people really start to see, am I getting a return on investment? Then you'll start to see better decisions. I want your audience to just start with making better decisions. So let's just focus on the problem. Let's look at the data and let's figure out the right technology to solve that problem.
Really good advice, and I hope listeners you pick that up. So you mentioned earlier in the interview, talked about a short training which business owners can use to get started in with AI. So can you let us know where they can find it and get
Hey,
started?
Peter, what I'll commit to do is we'll get you a couple of URLs that you could put in the show notes. Maybe
Okay.
I don't have the URL off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'll admit,
Okay.
um, but we'll get that to you so that you can include it in the description, maybe of the podcast.
All right. All right. So once this goes live, we'll just add all the links. And if you want to get started, you
Perfect.
want to understand more about AI, generative AI, how you can use AI in your business, you can just get there, go there, learn the terms, like you said, learn all the lingo. So if you're talking to someone about it, you're not totally lost. All right.
The
So,
other thing I'll say, Peter, is we do have a community at AWS called the AWS Connected Community that I would encourage your listeners to go sign up for. It's free. It's a great place to learn. We've got stuff about different industries, different technologies. There is a spot, of course, as you would expect, on AI and ML. So you can learn there as well. And again, a quick search for AWS Connected Community will get you right to that spot. And there's a bunch of resources there, including some fireside chats that I've done with customers who have leveraged technology, where you hear from a customer, not from me, the technologist, but hear what real customers are doing and what problems they're solving.
all right. So we would also link that AWS Connected Community. That will be linked to in the show notes. So I think I'll join that too, probably.
Oh, please do, Peter. We'd love to have you, man.
All right. So thank you so much for coming on the Tech Your Business podcast today.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate you and what you do, and it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. And for the listeners, thank you for being with us on this episode of the Tech Your Business podcast. I hope in the last 40 or so minutes, I hope you've learned how you can use AI as your Iron Man suit to turn yourself into a superhero, to turn your business into a superhero business. So till next week, when we come back with another episode of the Tech Your Business podcast, like Ben said, keep learning because things are changing really, really fast. So bye for now.